What you manifest in your mind, you can bring to reality.
This episode, I'm talking about legitimately the first podcast I got into. Last episode was the first podcast I had seen or was aware of. But this is the first podcast that I started following religiously. It's Diggnation, hosted by Kevin Rose and Alex Albrecht, former hosts of Screensavers from Tech TV. Them and a bunch of other people from Tech TV started a podcast network called Revision 3. And one of their flagship shows was Diggnation. Basically, same type of production as The Broken. In a way, it's both Alex and Kevin sitting on a couch, laptops in front of them, and they're drinking. Drinking was a big part of the show. They both, get toasted during the episodes, although later on they started drinking tea and kind of, started getting healthier towards the end of the run. But the podcast started back in 05. The first episode was July of 2005. And then the last one was, let's see. Yeah, so the end of 2011 when it ended, the last episode. I don't think I've ever watched the very last episode, just emotionally, just wasn't ready for it. But they were so ahead of their time. First off, video podcasts. They were doing podcasts before podcasts were podcasts. But they would sit. It was very like Wayne's World-esque, but tech focused. And they would review stories that were found on Digg, digg.com, which was Kevin Rose's website that he created. And it kind of was a way to bookmark, kind of very similar to Reddit in a lot of ways. But they kind of went in a different direction over time. But they would feature articles that were on Digg, and they would talk about them. So very tech heavy. But just so funny. Just talking about it makes me want to go revisit the show. But it was back in 2007. I moved into my own apartment, no roommates. I wanted to get rid of cable. I used to have DirecTV, which was nice, but I just wanted to get rid of it. It was a distraction, and I wanted to focus on my art. I wanted to focus on my graphic design business at the time, but mostly want to focus on art. So from that day, I was a cord cutter, 2007, I think, 2006, maybe. I don't remember exactly when I moved in my own, but it was around then. And so I still needed some kind of entertainment. I had DVDs. I had a huge DVD collection. But I thought, or I had remembered The Broken. So I looked it up. I looked up Kevin Rose, I think. It was MySpace days, and I found he was doing Diggnation, and I started watching it. And then later started watching other Revision shows like Totally Rad Show and Techzilla. But it was the first one. You subscribed through iTunes. It was I wasn't subscribed to any audio podcast, just their video podcast. The podcast was like around an hour long, so it was great. It was a show, and it came out every week, which I look forward to it coming out. I would binge old shows, and it's just an interesting time because it was, before when they started, it was pre-smartphone, it was pre-tablets, it was they started kind of the beginning of that transition, and then through that, the iPhone came out. When it was limited, you couldn't have any apps, and I remember petitioning people to contact Apple to open it up for developers, which eventually Apple did. But it was interesting seeing the growth of technology evolve through their show because they covered technology. But it was just also a lot of fun. The joy of podcasts is like you're hanging out with friends. Gives you the ability to hang out with and not participate, but at least listen into interesting conversations if you're surrounded by smart people. you're the average of the five people you hang around with the most, and I definitely spend more time listening to podcasts than I am around people, um, which is an interesting thing you can do in this day and age with this technology. But yeah, so not only, I mean, you got to see technology evolve, but you also got to see podcasting as an art form evolve, because the Revision 3, the network that they were a part of, that, Kevin Rose was part, like, owner. He was kind of like similar to All Things Comedy. Bill Burr and Al Madrigal and like a bunch of comedians are kind of like the owners of it. Uh, Kevin Rose was one of the founders of Revision 3. And getting to see the evolution of just that network and how they went from kind of a bunch of independent podcasters kind of together into a legit studio building, production studio. And then, the initial podcast bubble that nobody knew about happened before anybody knew about, like, easy decade before anybody knew what podcasts were. Uh, yeah, just it was an audio podcast as well. I never listened to it. I always watched it, and it was just like I watched it on my laptop, and it was just the most amazing thing. Actually, I think I watched it. I think it was when I moved out of that apartment and to Hillcrest in San Diego. So that was more 07, 08. And no, 07. I don't know, people. It's around that time. And I just binged it and loved it and kept up with it. And yeah, and it was great. Even their camera guy, you got to see Hippie Glenn, David Prager. That's where I first discovered Gary Vaynerchuk and Tim Ferriss. Tim Ferriss, they're both, they're all buddies, because there was only a few people doing the shit back then. But yeah, just introduced to like so many different things from that point. But Diggnation, it's just, I love it. I'm literally gonna put it on while I'm editing this week's episodes. Just because it just talking about it, it was such a big part of my life. Because it's like it was one of the initial inspirations for me I did the Billy Dallas show. Well, that was more based on TRS, but it was like podcasting for me has been a source of entertainment and inspiration for a huge part of my life. And this was the first show that it's just like, imagine when TV came out and you've had like this show, whatever show, I don't remember what shows were out when TV first came out, but it's just like there's this brand new thing that's available, and this show is awesome, and it's like I get to see it evolve. And then the art form, like even after the 2011, like people didn't know what podcasts were really till Serial. I mean, more people know podcasts now. Like now when I say podcast, people know what I'm talking about. It's almost become like the Kleenex of all like online media, or new media is what it used to be called back in those days. But yeah, Alex Albrecht, amazing. He's was also part of Totally Rad Show. He's actor. He was I think he directed like a fucking, can't even remember what it was called. He was super into video games. And then, Kevin Rose, just a huge tech guy, and then really smart entrepreneur guy. But it's just a great show. Diggnation. I love it so much. Yeah, thank you. This show comes out every day, people. You can subscribe to this one everywhere podcasts are found, including iTunes. Subscribe everywhere. Binge the show over at patreon.com/inspired disorder. Oh, yeah, Diggnation. First one to do live shows, too. Like, they did live shows at Stubbs in Austin, I think. Early. InspiredDisorder.com for all of my work. At Ray Taylor for me on all social media. Have a great day, everybody. Peace out!